Good morning. I'll call to order today's regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee. It's August 7th, 2014. I'm Lisa Bender, the committee chair, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Council Members Reich, Goodman, Johnson, and Warsami. And I believe Council President Johnson will join us during today's meeting. We have 7 items on today's agenda. The first is a public hearing, and we'll return to that in a moment, about Linden Crossing. We have 4 items on the consent agenda, and then 2 discussion items. The discussion items are item number 6, which is a discussion of the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Master Plan and Dinkytown Business District Plan. And the 7th item, which is discussion, is a discussion of the Mississippi River Corridor Critical Area Draft Rules, which is managed by the DNR. So before we get to those, I will return to the consent agenda items number 2 through 5. Item number 2 is on-premise signage. It's a subject matter introduction and staff referral of the subject matter introduction of the following ordinance amending Title 20 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances, amending requirement that signage be placed at the primary building wall by Councilmember Gordon. Item number 3 is a staff referral for farm stands, amending Title 20 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances, regarding farm stand regulations, also by Councilmember Gordon. Item number 4 is appointments to the Minneapolis Arts Commission for wards 2 and 1. And item number 5 is referred by the Planning Commission about Riverton Community Housing at 1227 4th Street Southeast and 425 13th Street Avenue Southeast, a petition filed by Mary Novak with Project for Pride and Living to rezone the properties from R5 to OR3 to allow for construction of a new 66-unit residential building with ground for commercial space. Does anyone want to pull any of the consent items for discussion? Seeing none, I'll move items 2 through 5 on the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Those items carry. Now we'll return to the public hearing for item number 1, which is Linden Crossing at 4250 and 4264 Upton Avenue South. Just to give an overview of how we'll manage this, we'll start with a staff presentation. Then we'll ask the appellant to speak, and then we will ask the applicant to speak before opening the public hearing. And Mr. Wittenberg, I've forgotten to introduce our guests today. So I want to do that before we get to the public hearing. I'm pleased that we're joined today by 3 visitors from our sister city in Kuopio, Finland. And we have 3 really distinguished guests who I'd like to ask to stand up, and I'll introduce them briefly. We have Leo, who's an architect and a coordinator of city projects for the city of Kuopio. And I won't attempt to pronounce the last names, which I will slaughter. Kaya, who's the chair of our partnership with their sister city program. And then Irina, who's a world-famous concert pianist and music lecturer at their university, and we're really honored to have them here. Councilmember Goodman will be hosting their tour of our city today. So thank you so much for joining us. All right, thank you, Mr. Wittenberg.
Thank you, committee members. Good morning. This application in front of you this morning is an appeal filed by Jane Prince on behalf of Linden Hills Residents for Responsible Development. They filed an appeal of the City Planning Commission's decision of July 14th, 2014 to approve a new 4-story mixed-use building with 20 dwelling units and approximately 6,100 square feet of commercial space. The proposed site contains 2 parcels located at 4250 and 4264 Upton Avenue South. It's located in a C1 zoning district, also the Linden Hills Overlay District. The applications required for the project are a conditional use permit to increase the allowed height from 3 stories or 42 feet to 4 stories, 56 feet, variance to reduce the north side yard setback, variance to reduce the west interior side setback, and site plan review. The site's located at the northwest corner of 43rd and Upton. It's within a designated neighborhood commercial node. Surrounding uses in the area, there are a significant mix of commercial and residential uses, including multifamily housing, low-density residential housing, a number of smaller-scale storefronts, and we're approximately a mile or less to the west of Lake Harriet. The site in question currently is occupied by a two-story office building that's located toward the north of the site. And at 4264, the south end of the site, there's a one-story building that was most recently the home of Famous Dave's Restaurant and was previously the site of a gas station. As I referenced, the new proposal is for a four-story mixed-use building, ground-level commercial uses with 3 stories of residential uses above, a total of 20 dwelling units. The overall gross floor area of the building would be approximately 51,000 square feet. The proposed building fronts along both Upton Avenue and West 43rd Street. There would be below-grade parking provided for residential uses, and 22 parking spaces would be provided accessory to the commercial uses, and those would be at grade level. The proposal is an amendment to previously approved project, a project that was approved by the City Planning Commission in October of 2012. The two projects, the proposed versus the approved, are quite similar, except that the applicant is proposing to increase the number of units from 18 to 20. And in order to achieve this, they're proposing a partial four-story, essentially, that would cover up approximately 50% of the floor below it, and would add about 8,500 square feet to the version that was previously approved by the City Planning Commission. I think it's worth noting some of the substantial differences between the project, from the project that's in front of you now versus a project that was known as Linden Corner at the same site that actually encompassed a greater number of properties at this intersection. That project was denied by the City Council on appeal, again, prior to the version that was approved by the City Planning Commission and not appealed. The Linden Corner project included a total of 5 addresses. This project in front of you includes 2 parcels, 2 addresses. The Linden Corner project included approximately 89,000 square feet, and again, this project has approximately 51,000 square feet. So the proposal in front of you is about 57% the size of the version that was denied by the City Council several years ago. The Linden Corner proposal was a 5-story building at 59 feet to the highest point. The proposal in front of you is a 4-story building, 56 feet in height at the highest point. In the City Council's findings for their denial of the Linden Corner project, it was evident that one concern was that the overall scale of that proposal was more consistent with a project that one might find in a C2 zoning district rather than the C1 district that covers the property. That is an issue that you'll probably see in a theme in the public correspondence that you've received to date, that suggesting that the project really is attempting some sort of end around the C1 zoning district that is on the site. And I think that's perhaps in direct reference to the findings that the City Council made about the first much larger project that was proposed on the site. This will be a little bit difficult to read, but granting the conditional use permit to 14 feet in staff's analysis would not negatively affect surrounding properties. And part of the reasoning for that is that essentially this site sits in somewhat of a valley. The green contours that you see on this site are 2-foot changes in elevation. So this is an 880 feet above sea level elevation at this location right here at the corner of the property. You see when you go to the north, not very far to the north, that gets up to 892, 894. So less than a block to the north, there's a 14-foot height increase compared to the corner of 43rd and Upton. If you go to the east, about a block to the east, there's about a 10-foot increase in the grade. Half a block to the south, 886, and then up to 900 feet, so roughly a 20-foot elevation change. Certainly a much more gradual change as one goes to the west. You see 886 and 888, about a block to the west. So the particular location of this project in lower grade compared to many of the neighboring properties was a factor in staff's analysis of the conditional use permit to increase height. It should also be noted that the proposed fourth floor would be set back a minimum of 12 feet from the building edges of the third floor below it. And in many cases, the third floor would be set back greater than 12 feet on other sides of the building. This is a page from the Linden Hills Small Area Plan, which was adopted by the City Council in December. There was a great deal of discussion about building height in the small area planning process. This page includes the most explicit policies related to building height in the small area plan. A maximum of height of 3 or 4 stories is allowed for multifamily residential and mixed-use buildings within the 3 neighborhood commercial nodes. This is one of the 3 neighborhood commercial nodes in Linden Hills. Encourage overall building heights and floor-to-floor heights that reflect adjacent architectural context, and encourage building heights, buildings that are shorter than the current zoning code maximums for 3 and 4 stories, 42 and 56 feet respectively. And as referenced, the applicant is proposing a 56-foot tall building that would be the maximum height that we would see of a 4-story building in districts that allow 4 stories as of right. We did encourage Mr. Dwyer to consider lowering some of those floor-to-ceiling heights, but ultimately this is the proposal that he moved forward with and that we analyzed against the required legal findings. And the third point here, the 4-story of any building in the 3 neighborhood commercial nodes and along the community corridors shall be stepped back from the street-facing facades of the building by at least 10 feet. And there's the diagram. And this building, again, does reflect that typology called for it in the small area plan. Staff is also recommending approval of the variances of the north and west side yards. The Planning Commission, again, granted those requests. I understand that there is some concern now about those variances. I'll just note that the first 3 floors of this building are essentially identical to the version that was approved by the Planning Commission and not appealed. The setbacks are increased by the fact that the applicant is adding that fourth floor, and that 4th floor is set back a much greater distance from property lines than would actually be required of that floor. In your analysis of variances, essentially practical difficulty has to be shown. Practical difficulty under state statute and as reflected in our ordinance is essentially a 3-part test. One is are there unique circumstances? 2, would there be, is the applicant proposing a reasonable use? And 3, what is the impact on the character or life safety of the area? In terms of the site plan review application, the applicant did not request any alternative compliance from the standards of our site plan review ordinance. Every standard of that chapter has been met by the proposal. The appellant's attorney has submitted a statement stating their reasons for filing the appeal. I will obviously let them speak to elaborate on their reasons for appeal. It should be noted one issue that has come up is the posting of posters on the property. The city sends applicants 8.5 by 11 orange posters that are to be posted on the property at least 10 days prior to the public hearing. Last night we received a letter from the appellant's attorney suggesting that those not all of those posters had been posted, therefore invalidating the proceedings at the City Planning Commission. However, I do have a notarized affidavit from the developer, from Mr. Dwyer, indicating that those posters were placed. So I guess we'll see if that is a point of discussion. At the City Planning Commission public hearing, one person attended to speak in opposition to the project, although it should be noted that two additional area residents showed up and had planned to speak in opposition, but the public hearing ended much more quickly than they had anticipated. So there would have been, I guess, 3 people who would have spoken in opposition. Staff received 270 comments prior to the public hearing. Ms. Anderson, the planner who evaluated the project, indicated that roughly a dozen additional comments had been submitted to her between the City Planning Commission meeting and this Tuesday, and a majority, certainly a strong majority, expressed opposition, both in the larger body of letters that were received prior to the public hearing and many of the letters received afterward. Staff has, I've received 7 pieces of communication about the project from the public since Tuesday. 6 of those have actually stated support. I was not present at last night's Linden Hills Neighborhood Council meeting, but my understanding, and someone will correct me if I'm wrong, is that the neighborhood's zoning committee had voted to oppose the project. However, the neighborhood's full board voted to not oppose the project. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wittenberg. Are there questions? Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. Mr. Wittenberg, I had a couple of questions I'm hoping you can clear up. There have been a lot of comments with regard to the fact that the developer has come back to us. I just want you to clarify the property owner's right to come back as many times as they would like and ask for approvals for a project on the property. Is there some sort of double jeopardy once you come in and ask and you have an approved project? Are you allowed to come in and ask again? And if so, how many times?
Chair Bender, Councilmember Goodman, it's not at all unusual that a development project would come before the City Planning Commission multiple times based on the evolution of the project, and we will happily take their fees as many times as they want to pay them.
Madam Chair, Mr. Wittenberg, I'm getting a lot of email that says, please don't approve the CUP and uphold the zoning code. I guess I would probably say, since a CUP means allowed with conditions, it would not be consistent with the zoning code to say no. Can you comment on that?
Sure, Councilmember Goodman, as you're well aware, a conditional use permit is the mechanism that our city has chosen to consider building height on sort of a case-by-case basis when you exceed a certain threshold. I was looking at some data about major projects, housing projects approved by the city from, I think it was 2008 through 2013, outside of downtown where we have no height limits in most downtown districts. And almost half of those projects during that time period had filed conditional use permits to increase their allowed height.
And can you just define what a conditional use permit means?
Sure. As you alluded to, a conditional use permit is essentially an allowed use subject to conditions. You have to have a strong basis to deny. A conditional use permit to increase height does have a little bit higher threshold. There are extra findings that you have to consider, including the scale and character of surrounding uses, shadowing, that kind of thing.
And then I remember, because I was here at that time, that one of the things that was happening in 2012 was there was a small area plan in process, correct?
Councilmember Goodman, I don't recall exactly when that process started, but it was certainly at the very least on the cusp of getting going at that point.
So one of the reasons why people like me were concerned about approving something that seemed pretty drastic at the time was there was no small area plan in place. Now there is a small area plan in place, correct?
That has been adopted by the City Council. We certainly, of course, have the relatively clear policies of the city's comprehensive plan that speaks to neighborhood commercial nodes and encouraging medium to high density housing in neighborhood commercial nodes and mixed use buildings of at least 2 stories.
And the small area plan that was adopted by us does say that buildings could be 3 to 4 feet, 3 to 4 stories, correct?
In the 3 neighborhood commercial nodes, yes.
And this is one of them, correct?
That's correct.
And up to 56 feet, correct?
Although it does strongly encourage buildings to lower their floor plates.
But
Yes.
it doesn't require it.
That's correct. There was a lot of discussion about that, and the Planning Commission and City Council specifically removed proposed language in the small area plan that would have created perhaps a little bit of a conflict with our zoning
And
ordinance.
in the play between a small area plan and zoning, which rules?
Well, that's not a simple question as you might imagine, but the basic idea is that a small area plan is aspirational policy guidance, but ultimately you have to meet the zoning ordinance.
And does this meet the zoning ordinance?
If you find that the findings have been met for the granting of a conditional use permit in this case, absolutely it meets the zoning ordinance.
And the staff has recommended that it does, correct?
And the Planning Commission agreed with that, correct?
Thank you.
Are there other questions? I just have one, and if you don't know this, maybe the applicant can clarify. Do you know the setbacks on each side? I'm curious. You said they're all 12 feet or more, but I wondered if you know the exact setbacks on the 4th floor from each side. And again, if you don't know,
I do have that. One moment. Chair Bender, you see that this is shown as 11 feet 9 inches here, 14, 9, 15 feet 3 inches, 12 feet 3, 24 feet, 14 feet, 17 feet.
Thank you. That's helpful. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, then I'll ask the appellant to please come forward, and you'll have time to tell us why we're here and why this has been appealed. And after that, we'll have the applicant speak, and then I'll open the public hearing.
Thank you, Chair Bender. My name is Jane Prince. I'm an attorney with Weinblatt and Gaylord, now located in Invergrove Heights, and I am representing the appellant today, Linden Hills Residents for Responsible Development. I want to address the new issue that came in last night. We have heard from several people that the site was not properly marked with the notice of public hearing signs that the city requires to be posted on the 4 corners of the site. Mr. Dwyer is here today. He can obviously answer that question for you, but I have 2 affidavits that still have to be notarized, which we will be turning in today from people who say there were no signs posted on the 4 corners of the site, that the only signs that anyone saw, there was one on the famous Dave's building about 50 feet away from the sight line and obscured by trees. And someone else said there may have been a sign on the Edward Jones building. This is a serious matter. I'm sure you understand that in the middle of summer, it's important that people have every kind of notice that's possible. Summer vacations and meeting schedules are not what they are at other times of the year. The corner at 43rd and Upton would have been in the center of downtown Linden Hills and would have attracted considerable attention. This is an extremely serious matter because if the applicant did not make a diligent effort to post the four corners, then all of the proceedings to date can be invalidated. So I ask you to take that very seriously. There is case law on that as well. My client, now I'll start my presentation. My client wants to reach a resolution in this case. And we reach, shortly after filing appeal, which we needed to do to preserve the appeal, we reached out to Mr. Dwyer. We also sent a letter to Councilmember Palmisano to see if there was a way to get to a height of not 56 feet, but something that the neighborhood could live with. We are still interested in that kind of negotiation, and I'll get to that in a few moments. In 2012, this body soundly denied this appeal as it relates to the conditional use permit and to the setback variances. At that time, the conditional use permit was for 59 feet, not 56 feet, but it is the same site, it's the same applicant, and these are the same issues. So the finding of facts that were written by the city attorney and adopted by the city council are indeed precedential on these matters. And any decision you make, I warn you, could be in conflict with those findings, could be determined to be arbitrary and capricious. You have my summary of the appeal. You also received my legal memorandum. I hope you had a chance to look at it. I won't rehash everything, but I do want to go through some of the high points. The Planning Commission erred by granting the CUP on the basis of numerous fact errors in the CPED report. And they're distressing because they involve untruths that are in the report. First of all, Ms. Anderson stated in public and at the meeting and also in the report that 56 feet is consistent within the commercial node. In the findings of fact from last time, and also, let's be really clear here what the commercial node is. The commercial node at 43rd and Upton is a C1 district. It's a very fragile C1 district because it's surrounded by, as Mr. Wittenberg pointed out, other much more intense zoning districts. The 7 or 8 story building that is consistently referred to by the planning commission, by planning staff as creating a basis for a 56-foot building in the C1 zone is in an OR3 zone at 44th and Upton. That is a residential node, and it is not part of the commercial node. Secondly, she incorrectly responded to the planning commissioner who asked if this was one of the sites designated for density. This site was this body, the Zoning and Planning Committee, before adopting the small area plan, put in the language that Mr. Wittenberg pointed out to you, which is really significant. It's in the specific implementation recommendations, and it states that buildings in this node should be encouraged to have floor-to-floor heights and an overall height consistent with the node and that are lower than those called for in the zoning code. So to Council Member Goodman's questions, that language that I believe you added to the small area plan prior to its adoption was specifically designed to ensure that we didn't have this problem of somebody maxing out 56 feet. A C1 zone does not have a 56 height limit. Indeed, it is the only commercial zoning district that does not have 56 feet as a height of right. We are, of course, saying that the grant of the conditional use permit in this case is an end around to rezone the site. There's a C2 zone across the street. If Mr. Dwyer wants to build a C2 building, he should go through the rezoning process. The city should do a rezoning study. It is an end around. The city, as Mr. Wittenberg pointed out, the city attorney's finding of facts adopted by the city council state that that is a concern. To Councilmember Goodman's questions on whether this satisfies the conditional use permit criteria, it does not. In 2012, the city attorney and the council's findings of facts stated that a height of 59 feet, in this case we're looking at 56, you see yardsticks here, was injurious to the use, enjoyment, and potential development of surrounding properties. The setback variances, this is tremendously frustrating. This developer brought in a project in October of 2012 seeking one variance. It was granted. He is now back saying he can't develop the project. The criteria that the Supreme Court has set are practical difficulties, circumstances unique to the property, and cannot be based on economic considerations. Those are firm under Minnesota law. And just recently, in an article in the Twin Cities Business Journal, Mr. Dwyer stated he needed the fourth floor to make the project cash flow. We're back at it. This is to make the project cash flow. Variances cannot be granted to make a project cash flow. I will close again with what may be a surprising proposal and one that I hope our Finnish guests might appreciate. And that is that we are in a situation in the city of Minneapolis and in many large cities, but I know because I've been involved in it over here several times, of controversies of height and density that are ripping neighborhoods apart. St. Paul, in my experience, has used facilitated mediation on zoning issues as difficult as the expansion of the University of St. Thomas to include 2 blocks south of Summit Avenue, and the development of a truck transfer facility on a residential edge. Very difficult land use matters can be solved through facilitated mediation. My clients have reached out to the applicant. We did receive an encouraging response from Councilmember Palmisano that she appreciated the spirit and intent of our request. We have until October 19th for final action in this matter. The 120 days extension has gone through. So I suggest, in that you don't need to take action today, that you do invite the parties to try to work this out as a model for neighborhoods to come together and reach an agreement rather than being torn apart. Do you have any questions?
And Councilmember Gooden.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I just had a question for Mr. Nelson with regard to the attorney's assertion that if the signs were not posted on all 4 corners, that the actions would be invalidated.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Goodman, no, that's not true. Again, as Mr. Wittenberg noted, we have an affidavit from the applicant that they complied with the notice, and realize that the public notice required for land use applications involves a lot of things. There's newspaper notice of 15 days. There's notice to the registered neighborhood groups 21 days before. And then there's notice to each individual property owner within 350 feet of the boundaries 15 days in advance, in addition to this posted card notice, which I would say is rather antiquated, but still, it was complied with. And again, the ordinance says the failure to give mailed notice to individual property owners or any defects in the notice. I say there are no defects, but let's just assume there are. Shall not invalidate the proceedings provided a bona fide attempt to comply with the section has been made, and a bona fide attempt was made here. In addition, as we see, there really is no prejudice to any of these folks. There's a lot of people here to talk today, and this is a public hearing, a second public hearing, and everybody will have the opportunity to speak. So again, there's no prejudice, assuming there was any defect, and I would say there's not.
Madam Chair, may I ask another question? I like the idea brought forward with regard to some sort of mediation, but it would be my guess that the 60-day rule would apply, and if we were willing to not take action, it would be deemed valid. I don't know that that would be a risk that the neighbors would be willing to take. Not that I think we have to take action. I think you're going to run up against the 60-day rule, then everything they want is essentially approved. I guess I would ask Mr. Nilsson the answer to that. Where are we as it pertains to the 60-day rule?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Gooden, Ms. Prince was correct. The current 60-day deadline is October 18th or 19th, I think, as she said. It was extended unilaterally by staff an additional 60 days, which we have the right to do and is commonly done. But in that regard, the idea of we don't have the city does not have the power to force the applicant into some sort of mediation that he doesn't want to do. But in terms of timing, the city's obligation is to take final action on this project by the 60-day law deadline.
Which is October 18th or something.
Yeah, October 18th or 19th, I think. It's on the staff report.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nielsen, while we have you, could you clarify what's before us today? I believe it's just an appeal of the CUP decision, not the variances that the Planning Commission approved.
Madam Chair, nope. The appellants have appealed all of the applications. Correct.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Could the appellant please come up?
Good morning, Chair Bender and members of the committee. I'm Carol Lansing. I'm an attorney at Faegre Baker Daniels. I am working with Mark Dwyer on this project. Mark is actually going to go first in substance, and I have a few comments after, but just to the notice issue. I have received these notices to post, and the instructions that we receive from staff say that you can post them on the buildings. A site that doesn't have a building up to the corner is allowed to post them on the buildings. Mark has shown me photos of these notices posted on both of the two buildings on the site. He has complied with the instructions and the intent of the ordinance on that.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you very much, council members. My name is Mark Dwyer. I have lived in Linden Hills for 20 years. I compost. And my address is 4632 Washburn Avenue South. I live a few blocks from the site. Quickly, with regard to the notices, I put them in the same place that I've always put them. I've had to put a number of notices on these properties. This is the first time I've heard a complaint about where they're located, but I've always been very conspicuous in my communication and trying to be open with my neighbors who disagree with my position on redeveloping this corner. I'd like first to just point out what this project is, and I will be very brief out of respect to your time. You've already seen the image. The project is the same as it was, with one exception. So what was approved was the 3 floors that you see. They're the only difference. And what we've come back to ask for is this upper level, the 4th floor, the partial 4th floor. It is stepped back, as Jason mentioned, by 12 feet or better on every side. It's further hidden by a cornice. There's a parapet wall that hides it as well. That is part of the approval of the 3 stories. It's already been approved. The intent is to hide it. The intent is to not change the sidewalk experience in any way for people who are enjoying the neighborhood. We like how it converts a 17,000 square foot roof into 4 additional units. We had planned to build 16, but we're adding 4 on the roof, which requires that 2 more, we'd be approved for 2 more than we were approved for previously. And it converts the remaining 50% of the roof to decks and green space. Previously, we had just been approved for a 1,000 square foot deck up there for use by tenants. The reason that we are coming back is not part of any trickery. We absolutely, after our first proposal was turned down, a moratorium was put in place that prevented us specifically from being entitled to our bonus FAR and prevented us from requesting a CUP for any height. That moratorium then led the way to the small area plan, and we've waited for those things to pass. We've been fortunate to see the market come back for this product, and that's why I'm back making this request. Otherwise, I would have made it the first time around, but the moratorium that was in place on commercial development prevented it. That was in 2012. The appellant has referenced the old project a lot. I know Jason covered this, but, you've already seen this slide showing all the setbacks. The old project, just for fun, I brought the old image. So here's what's proposed. The old project looked like this. Of course, that's from a different vantage point. But it was a full 5-story project, and I think that my takeaway from it being the appeal being upheld was that I was wrong to come in and ask for 2 floors via a CUP instrument. The concern expressed by the opposition was that I was asking for 2 floors versus 1 floor, which was more commonly accepted in a C1 district. What we did after that was turned down is we cut away pieces of the building that we had previously, we started with this. So we jettisoned 3 parcels to the north. The red line you see is on the north side of the building, and the gray shaded area shows what portion of the building was removed in response by the development team. The pocket park, previously we had proposed to replace it. You'll see in this image, the building had a main entry that came out to the pocket park. The building is approved, preserves the pocket park. So as highlighted here, the gray shaded area shows that that's another part of the building that has changed. As has been stated, this resulting proposal, even with the additional 4 units stepped back on the roof, is about 57% of the gross square footage of the original building. It's half of the unit counts. It is half of the parking stalls, half of the retail. It's 56 feet. Just commenting on that, the prior project had 40 units, and there was great interest expressed by empty nesting neighbors to move into them. The price point was more in line with their expectations for what they want to empty nest to. In the absence of those units, in the absence of the density that I initially asked for, we had to retool this, and this is a much higher end product now. The ceilings are higher. The retail is the same ceiling height, but the unit ceilings I beg your pardon, but in a $1 million condo, the expectation for ceiling heights is different than in a condo that is less than half that cost. And so what we're trying to do is create a project here that's successful, and this is what we believe we need to do to accomplish that. What I'd quickly like to do is demonstrate how our building is intended to reflect some of the buildings in the neighborhood that have really nice architecture, nice character. The first one is the building where our architects are housed, TEA2, T2 Architects. That's also the Harriet Brasserie restaurant on the first floor. The building beneath it is the Great Harvest Bakery. Our 3 floors, incidentally, as you look up at the cornice from our corner, the height to the cornice will be the same as the height as shown at the corner of the bakery there. This is the Wild Rumpus building, another good-looking building, and you see it does have step back. Some of these buildings, a couple of them, have kind of hidden stepped back rooftop living space. We think that we can do better than other buildings in the neighborhood. This one, if you're standing on our site and you look to the left, this building was built, I think, in the 80s, and these are condominiums, and they have some pretty decent height. Across the street is a 4-story apartment building, and I think that stands at 42 or 44 feet. And I think we can do better, and I think our design does better. And finally, for a sense of what you see around us in adjacent buildings, et cetera, this is a pretty good example. There again in the foreground is the bakery building, but behind it is a 6 or 7-story apartment condo building, depending on where you start counting. The height from the middle of the hill is 7 stories. I think it's 79 or 80 feet tall. I don't think people really who walk through the district necessarily say to themselves, well, this must be zoned OR and this must be zoned C1. I think what we're creating here is an experience that feels like 3 stories and will be a great addition to the neighborhood. So in closing, most of our team live or work in the neighborhood. We've designed a quality project for this corner. It's been a long time coming, but we'd like to build it now. And thank you very much for your time and your focus.
Thank you, Mr. Dwyer. Are there any questions for the applicant? Councilmember Gooden, is that from before? Yeah, no problem. Okay. All right, thank you. So we will open the public hearing. This time I'm going to have each side speak for about a half hour and then see how we're doing. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to speak that took the time to come out. So, and I'm also going to ask people to limit their remarks to 2 minutes to stay kind of on the topic that we're here to discuss. And I think maybe, did you want to say something else?
You can.
Oh, okay. So, but before I open the public hearing, do you have something else to add? Sure. Go ahead.
And I will be brief. I did want to touch on the zoning code and small area plan aspects. There's been a question of this is rezoning. Why don't, this should be C2. It is common. We believe that the C1 district is more appropriate for this site because of how it regulates uses, smaller scale retail uses, and all of the retail spaces in Linden Crossing will be compliant with the C1 retail areas and with FAR in the C1. So rezoning to C2 could open the door to uses and size that are not as consistent with the Linden Hills Small Area Plan. And it is common for the city to allow CUPs to increase height. As Mr. Wittenberg noted, half of the housing projects outside of downtown received a CUP to increase height over the limits of the district. There is nothing unusual in what we're proposing. The C1 district does not disallow heights of 56 feet. Like every other zoning district, it allows you to apply for increased height with a CUP. As staff and Mr. Dwyer indicated to you, this meets the criteria for a conditional use permit that it needs to meet in order for you to issue that permit, primarily because of the surrounding area, both in terms of its topography changes and the fact that there's several 4- and 4-story buildings and even a 7-story building in the area. The design of the building also, with the step backs of the upper floors and the articulation and building materials, also make it consistent with the scale and character of the surrounding area. The one thing I did want to focus on is the legislative history of the Linden Hills Small Area Plan. and this may not be very readable to you, but the first paragraph is the November 19th, 2013 draft of the small area plan that was presented for public hearing. In that draft, it said, as an implementation step, establish a maximum height of 44 feet. As Mr. Wittenberg told you, both the Planning Commission and City Council rejected establishing that maximum height. This City Council action indicates the directions they gave to amend the plan. And one of the changes was remove references to maximum height in feet from the Linden Hills Small Area Plan. What they added was a direction to staff, that staff be directed to encourage overall building heights of 3 and 4 stories less than the maximums in the code. What happened in the final draft that you've seen is that it says as implementation steps, a maximum height of 3 or 4 stories is allowed. It does include as an implementation step to encourage these lower building heights. Frankly, I believe that there should not be an implementation step in the plan that says encourage these lower building heights. I believe that was indicated for conversations that staff should have with applicants. But in any case, this plan does not disallow, does not prohibit building heights over 44 feet or a building height of 56 feet. As Mr. Wittenberg also noted for you, there are substantial changes in this project from the one that you denied in March of 2012, and so it would not be arbitrary and capricious for you to approve this project that's before you today. I will stop there unless you have any questions for me.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Sorry for the confusion there. I know you had asked for that time. Okay, with that, I will open the public hearing. And so why don't we start with those who are here to speak in favor of the project. Again, we'll keep this to 30 minutes in 2-minute increments, and then let the other side speak and then see how we're doing and if there are people who would still like to speak. So when you come up, please state your name and address for the record. And if possible, please start to line up so that we can move through these and allow everyone the time to speak. Come on up.
Madam Chair, members of the council, my name is Tim Princeton. I live at 1621 West 31st Street. I'm a resident of the East Calhoun neighborhood. While I'm a resident of the East Calhoun neighborhood, I'm first and foremost a resident of the city of Minneapolis. I'm a very proud resident of the city of Minneapolis, and one that hopes that we will again attain a population more accustomed to what we were in the 50s of around 500,000. I've heard many comments from the Linden Hills neighborhood groups comparing this project to Uptown and projects that are in Uptown. And I thought it would be useful if I can share with the neighborhood group that this project could not be further from an Uptown project. The Track 29 project at 200 units, the 3 Elan projects each at 200 units, the Flux project at 240 units. The smallest project, the Walkway project at about 90 units, is 7 stories and has a cantilevered hot tub over Lake Street. So this 20-unit project is nothing like any projects that are going on in Uptown, nor should it be. And I want everybody to know that I do not believe that Linden Hills warrants that kind of project. Those projects are also almost all stick construction. This project at 20 units, concrete construction, surrounded in brick, is a 100-year building. I wish the projects in Uptown were more akin to this. Unfortunately, they're not. This project has been twice supported by city staff, either in its current format or larger, and twice supported by Planning Commission, either in its current format or larger. I encourage the Commission to approve this project now without delay so that it can start yet this year. This project seems like a small contribution to the continued Minneapolis goal of increased population.
Thank you.
And a very limited sacrifice to the residents of Linden Hills. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next person, please come up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Andrew Degerstrom. My address is 2849 Irving Avenue South. Although I currently live in East Isles, I did live in Linden Hills for several years during the original Linden Corner debate, and I don't look back at that time with very fond memories. What I remember was a lot of inaccurate and misleading information being slung around by very vocal opposition. Myself, and I'm sure many others who were either indifferent or supported the original project, were intimidated into silence by the opposition. It is only now that I no longer live in the neighborhood that I have found the courage to speak up. So here we are today. The developer wants to add a partial fourth floor step back greater than 10 feet. I have read the Linden Hills Small Area Plan, I have read the staff report, and I have read the applicable city ordinance. And reading all three, it makes sense to me that this application should be allowed to go forward. And I also believe that in most neighborhoods, this would not be considered controversial. So what has the reaction been? Once again, a lot of inaccurate and misleading information being spread by vocal opposition. They even got KSTP to come and do a story. Well, that's not really hard. Just offer them a little taste of sensationalism and they will come running. Just look at their most recent piece of award-winning journalism reporting on rumors that the mayor and police chief aren't the best of friends. And today, they have bussed people up from the neighborhood in order to testify. So a developer wants to add a partial fourth story, and they bust people in to testify. I don't know about you, Madam Chair, or members of the committee, but I believe if that was turned into a headline, most people would assume it came from The Onion. As a committee, you can reach the reasonable decision to either grant or deny this appeal. Whichever decision you reach, this is not a scandal involving an evil developer or the unsympathetic council member who brazenly disregards the village democracy. Simply, this is a land use application that is being objectively and fairly evaluated using the criteria established by city ordinance. Nothing more, nothing less. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for your time this morning.
Thank you. As the next person, is there anyone else who wants to speak in favor of the project? Come on up.
Good morning. My name is Steve Dwyer. I am Mark's youngest brother. It's no surprise I am in favor of this project. I live in Linden Hills. I have for 12 years. And just a couple of comments. I think it's vital to the future of our city, especially in these small neighborhood commercial nodes, to approve this project today. I think of other core districts similar to 43rd and Upton, like 50th and Bryant, 46th and Bryant, 46th and Grand, that are, I think, looking at this as a model, and I think this would send a very good message for the future of those important commercial nodes and the neighborhoods around them, that smart growth with collaborative developers that live in the neighborhood can work. Not to mention that it meets, per Council Members Goodman's Q&A, which I learned a lot during that, so thank you, is in accordance with all applicable guidelines and laws. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I think this is not only important to Linden Hills, but to all other neighborhoods in the Minneapolis area. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you state your address for the record?
4620 Vincent
Thank you.
Avenue South.
Okay, the next person, please come up. Okay, would anyone else like to speak in favor of the project? Come on up.
My name is Bruce Allen, and my address is 2800 44th Street. That is the unit that would be looking down on the unit in question. I have a fourth floor condominium there, which is quite a bit higher than the original plan would have been at 5 stories. Now, I was born and raised in Linden Hills, went to Lake Harriet grade school, and on to Southwest, and my love of the area is long-standing, let me put it that way. But I've watched it lose some of its conveniences. I would like to be able to live without getting in my car to go everywhere. There's no grocery store there. The reason there's no grocery store there is there really isn't the commercial market to draw it. You know, this building would bring more middle-class people to that intersection, which would draw other businesses that would allow us to get out of our cars, such as a grocery store. When I grew up there, the Dunn Brothers building was a grocery store. Across the street, the hardware store was a grocery store. And if we have enough middle-class market there, we will again. Now, I realize that all of you have already studied all the stuff about how densifying the population brings a lot of good things to life. In my job, I spend a lot of time traveling, and I spend a lot of time in Europe, particularly. And I see much smaller communities having much more to offer that they can walk to. And I'd like to see that return to Linden Hills. Now, then I would move down off my perch at 2800 that looks down in this unit and move into one of these units, because they're nice. I think they decorate the neighborhood very nicely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in favor of the project? Okay, let's move then to folks who would like to speak against the project. Again, we'll limit to a half hour and see how we're doing. In the interest of time, please kind of get ready to come up, the next person, and state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Council members, good morning. My name is Rob Shanis. I'm an attorney with Capstone Law. I represent Dave Scott. Mr. Scott owns a home at 4251 Vincent Avenue South, which, when you look at the plans for this project, is the R1 district immediately to the west of the project. Saying it's to the west is less helpful than telling you that it's right behind the project. Our main concern, I'm going to talk about two issues, and Mr. Scott is not vehemently opposed to the project, but he does have concerns, and I do not believe those concerns have been critically addressed in the staff report or in other things. First of all, the issue of these of whether practical difficulties have been met. In Mr. Scott's case, there are two balconies that are so close to his property that will be looking down into him in his backyard and will eliminate any and all privacy that he's enjoyed. There are three requirements that you council members have to establish findings of fact to support. 2 out of 3 of those you cannot support. You cannot find facts to support, and I'll explain. First, you're required to find that the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. I have heard no one explain to you what is so unique about this property that it requires a variance. It's a flat, slightly L-shaped property, and Mr. Dwyer's designed a number of different designs that meet it without variances. We don't know of any practical difficulties. No one on behalf of Mr. Dwyer has spoken to practical difficulties today, and there's nothing in his submission to the city that explains to you what is so difficult about building a building on this property that doesn't require a variance. The only thing we've heard is this. Mr. Dwyer wants to build a building that's bigger, because if he builds a building that's a little bigger, he can get more units in there and make a little more money. But the statute clearly says that economic considerations don't, in and of themselves, meet the requirement for practical difficulties.
Just want to note the time.
Sure, So there's that issue, and then the only other issue, in addition to the issue of practical difficulties, I ask is that when the CUP for height was approved in this instance, there's nothing, as I can recall, in there that conditions it upon being built the way Mr. Dwyer has in the plans with these setbacks. It's customary for the council to approve a CUP with that condition, and I ask that the council do that if they approve the CUP for height.
Okay, thank you. Next person.
Good morning. My name is Gail Wells. I live on 1049 25th Avenue, which is just a few doors down from the new project. And we talk about density, but we're talking about density for upper middle class. We're not talking about density for diversity. I'd rather see diversity than all this density for high buck condominiums for upper middle class people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning. I have a slight speech problem, so if you don't understand what I'm saying, please ask me to repeat. I'm Yale Spencer. My address is 2727 West 43rd, Unit 406. I'm here to discuss with you the proposed change in height for this building. This is a drawing that is to scale, 1 inch equals 1 foot. The original 5-story building was 59 feet, and that was disapproved by the entire council. He came in with a 3-story building at 42 feet, and now comes in with a 4-story building at 56. That is exactly 3 feet, 1 yard 6 short for a 4-story building compared to 5. There's an article in the paper 2 weeks ago about a project in Glendale and Franklin, which has a 6-story building at 73 feet, which is about 12.3 inches per floor. The original building that he proposed averaged 11.8 feet, and now he's averaging 14 feet. Mr. Wittenberg asked him to consider making those floors lower, but he obviously did not comply. I'd also like to show you some pictures I took. This is standing on the corner of northeast corner of 43rd and Sheridan. The traffic light is 13 feet high. The trees are 34 feet, and he's going to build a 56-foot building. This area will be fully impacted for the building. I went to Mr. Meyer's home at 4247 and took a picture. This is a 7-foot ladder, 35-foot, the trees, and this area is what he would be looking at from his backyard. It may very well be that along the site, that this site is at 800 feet of elevation, and maybe, one block up is at 890. But Mr. Meyer and Mr. Scott are really looking at the back of that building, right where they sit and right where they live. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next person, come on up.
Good morning. Thank you for your time. My name is David Myers. I live at 4247 Vincent Avenue South, a property that my wife and I purchased in April of 2014. And by the way, I drove here. I wasn't bused. The back of our small property is adjacent to the property on which the proposed Linden Crossing will be built. We were aware of the agreement at the time of purchase in April. However, upon moving to Linden Hills in June 27th, we learned that the developer had sought a variance to C1 zoning. We opposed this proposal for the following reasons. We trusted in good faith that the agreement previously reached would be operational. A 42-foot height maintains the character of the neighborhood while permitting density appropriate within an urban environment. This agreement recognizes reasonable compatibility between C1 and R1 zoning, the latter of which is the zoning in which our new small home is located. A 56-foot height dwarfs our one-story home, potentially blocks light to our garden, sets a precedent for other building in this quaint, livable neighborhood. Having lived in Atlanta for 21 years, we are all too familiar with the havoc wreaked by rezoning variance precedents that compromise or destroy in-town neighborhoods and drive people to the suburbs, in addition to creating problems such as heat concentration, runoff, and racial and economic disparity. We believe those who support and claim to serve the public good must be accountable to the public good and find balance between an essential tax base, encouragement to developers, housing density appropriate to city living, and responsibility to all taxpayers. We have elected to remain in the city and pay taxes for an urban quality of life. Bowing to the persistence of developers' efforts to assure financial gain at the expense of committed dwellers' interests is a disservice to those of us who champion living in Minneapolis and help to assure that it remains a model city for city dwellers nationally. The argument that the city reconsiders proposals like this all the time is an affront to our commitment to this beautiful, livable city. We deserve adherence to delineated and defined policies that assure the common justice, and we expect that you will deny this proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Nikki Stensler. I live at 2727 West 43rd Street. First, I'd like to invite our Finnish guests to come and look at this particular site. I think that might be fun. I think a lot has been talked about the height of nearby buildings, which are indeed 4 stories or whatever. But this particular corner does not have high buildings. It has these stores do this better job. This particular corner has small buildings, low buildings, so that the sense of community, the sense of scale, and the sense of charm is maintained. And this is the heart of Linden Hills, which in itself is a very together community. So I ask that you consider that, and that keeping that three-story building as approved would be the best idea here.
Thank you. Come on up.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I appreciate your being here. Thank you for your service. My name is Robert Yund. I live at 4047 Sheridan Avenue South. Probably 100 feet more than 2 blocks away from this proposed building. Mr. Dwyer, I appreciate your 20 years in the neighborhood. I'll trump you. I've been there now for 44, going on 45. I live in the family house that's been there since 1917. I definitely speak in opposition to this, and does it seem like an end run? Absolutely it does. Zoning regulations were there to protect, to support neighborhoods. To go around the zoning regulations, I understand there are times when that must be, should be, can be done in benefit to the neighborhood. I do not see this in this case. Mr. Dwyer spoke about the fact that from the pavement you couldn't see any of the building on, the extra building on top of his new proposal. Of course not. From the pavement in front of a building you can't see the roof of any building. But his own illustrations from across the street clearly show that top level that he has added. When he spoke of it, he spoke of product. When I look at it, I look at neighborhood. I'd rather not have it in my neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next person. Come on up.
Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Christopher Maddox. I live at 4400 Upton Avenue South, Unit 306. And I just want to say a few words. To me, this request is disingenuous. And I say that because it goes against the majority of the wishes of the people in the community. The initial Linden Corner building was rejected by the City Council overwhelmingly, and a 3-story building was approved. There was no opposition at all to that building. I think most people in the community were happy with that and would support it. To me, this CUP for an additional level is just three stories. I'm sorry, this request for an additional level is just 3 feet shorter than the Linden Corner building and 14 feet higher than the approved 3-story building. And it's for me, it's effectively rezoning that node by the back door. I'm also concerned by character and transition, which are both addressed in the small area plan. The proposed building does not fit with its surroundings, especially in relation to the adjacent single-family homes on Vincent Avenue. A recommendation has been made to approve this project, but that does not mean it's the right thing to do. And I'd also like to note that Mr. Dwyer didn't make any mention of whether he'd be willing to negotiate with the neighbours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person, come on up.
Good morning. My name is Jean Johnson, and my address is 4221 Vincent Avenue South. As a member of the Small Area Plan Committee and a person who believes deeply in the value of civic participation, I strongly encourage you to not put forward this conditional use. The Small Area Plan Committee went to great lengths to engage the public while crafting the plan so that the resulting document would not simply be our own opinions, but a reflection of those of the entire neighborhood. The community overwhelmingly supported building heights of 3 stories, 42 feet, which is C1, at 43rd and Upton. But at the end of the process, the CPED staff informed the committee that 4 stories must be included in the language of the plan in order for it to pass the council. So, to be clear, the language that is in the plan regarding height in the small area plan was mandated by the city and was not what the committee found to be the will of the neighborhood. And here's why that's so important. The Linden Hills community spent $60,000, 18 months, and countless human hours to develop this plan. We worked in good faith. We produced a plan that is in line with the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Development and with long-term goals for growing the density in the city. Can we really, as a city, afford to throw out that much human capital for the sake of one developer's monetary gain? The executive summary of the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth states that if successful, Minneapolis in 2030, looking into the future, will include neighborhoods that are distinctive communities with a strong sense of place and active civic participation. Active civic participation, that's what it says, one of the keys to a successful Minneapolis future. To allow this conditional use is a total disregard of a huge amount of work by a large group, actually, of committed citizens who were told that this small area plan would matter and would guide the future development in a neighborhood that they love. It would send a message loud and clear that even though we as citizens can work with the city and think we have a voice in the planning future, we really don't. This level of civic participation and commitment is an integral part of developing a vibrant Minneapolis for the future and a resource that you as elected officials and we as citizens working together can't really afford to lose. I hope this at some level appeals to your sense of at one time being neighborhood citizens and active participants in this way. So thank you very much.
All right, next person. How many more people would like to speak? Just take a check. Okay, great. Come on up.
Hello, my name is Claudia Reichert. I live in 4736 Vincent. I've lived there for 31 years. To her point, I went to all the meetings, I did everything, I got engaged, and I thought, my gosh, this is fabulous. We've got a place that people care about. And truthfully, I think the plan where we all agreed to was a great plan. They came back and set it back. I think it looks great. I love the architect. It's a great project. But this just seemed like it underhanded us. It underhanded what we got together to do. And I felt, why did we do all that work if all of a sudden this can happen? And it just seemed like it was disingenuous, to that gentleman's point. I just, all of us in our neighborhood are going, what happened? We agreed to something, and it's a good project, and all of us think it's a very lovely project now. But then all of a sudden, something else just got passed, and we didn't, maybe something was posted on the, nobody walks by that building where you don't even go into the restaurant anymore. Why would anybody go up to that building and look at something posted? So I don't know. I just, truthfully, I am just disappointed that all of our hard work is just kind of thrown out the door. And why can't we go down to the original proposal that we all agreed to? So, and truthfully, I run an architecture firm. I don't really even mind what he's doing because I don't really mind the setback. I am just so disappointed in the process that I can't believe it. I'm to the point why would I get involved again if this is how it happens? That it's just pretty much very disappointing to me.
Thank you. Okay, next person.
Hi, my name is Alan Gibbous. I live at 4239 Abbott Avenue South. I moved into the Linden Hills neighborhood in 1976. One of the things that attracted to me about the neighborhood was the sort of sense of community, a certain quality of quaintness that was particularly present at the 43rd and Uptown intersection. I fell in love with Paris when I went there, and one of the things I noticed, they had 3-story or 4-story buildings, and not anything that would be gargantuan. When I saw the 42-foot proposal, I thought, this is really wonderful. This really fits. It is quaint. It is not gargantuan. Changing the structure from a 42-foot building to a 56-foot building changes it from quaint to gargantuan. It is not consistent with the character of the neighborhood, and it is clearly visible. There are hills on both sides, and you cannot avoid seeing visually the gargantuan nature of what has been proposed. So I request that you deny the conditional use permit.
All right, thank you. Next person. Come on up.
My name is Patricia Murray, and I live in the apartments at 4271 Sheridan Avenue South, which is right across from Famous Dave's and next to the dental building. I'm concerned about parking. I've lived there for 32 years, so I've seen a lot of changes. I'm concerned about the parking issue. What I'm hearing is that the original proposal had 2 floors of underground parking, and that's been reduced to 1 floor of underground parking. When we have the many activities around the lakes, particularly Lake Calhoun, nobody can move in our neighborhood because there is no parking. And if there is going to be less parking in this new proposal than there was the last time, at the same time increasing the number of apartments, that's ridiculous. That's a win-win for them and a lose-lose for us. In addition, we have some very popular restaurants that are increasingly popular. That's additional parking problems, as well as just increased crowds around our little intersection. And I understand that's supposed to be good, but I just feel as though the people who have money, who had money to go to the suburbs, now have the money to gentrify our neighborhood with luxury tear downs all around. Nobody is paying attention to the new houses. There's one on 39th and Xerxes, a new house that's about this far from the next door neighbor. It's just offensive. And I hope you'll consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person?
Chair Bender, members of the committee. My name is Larry Lavercombe, 4545 Drew Avenue South. I'm the zoning committee chair in Linden Hills. I've been the chair for about 12 years. I've waited this long. I'm not actually going to speak for or against, but I do want to echo something that was said at the end of the attorney's message. I would like to encourage all of you on the committee here to encourage us to do one more real significant negotiation. It's my opinion that we would all benefit from some kind of agreement here. So on the one hand, I would like for you to encourage the group, the opposition group, on 2 fronts. Number one, to designate a small negotiating team, 2 to 4 people to represent and negotiate on behalf of the entire group. In my opinion, it's been virtually impossible for the developers, Mr. Dwyer and that group, to negotiate when there was not one person to negotiate with. We would say one thing and someone would say something else, so it's been very difficult on their side to negotiate. I would also encourage you to encourage the group to be prepared to make real and realistic concessions to the developer that will allow the project to be financially successful. On the other hand, regarding the developer, the developer has said that they can build the currently approved 3-story project, but that what they want to do is build a better building and one that's more successful, more financially successful. And they are right now suggesting, they're asking to increase the size of their, or the number of units from 16 to 20. So they're adding 4 luxury units. And so I would encourage you to encourage the developer to make real concessions such that we have a better building yet, one that fits into the context of the neighborhood and that the neighborhood can be happy with, and one which is still a win for them financially, where they make more money than they were making with the 3-story building, maybe not as much with the additional 4 units.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next person. How many more people would like to speak? Okay, great.
Madam Chair and members of the board, my name is Kristen Tombers. I am the owner of Clancy's Meats and Fish at 4307 Upton Avenue South. I've been there for almost 11 years now, so I've become very familiar with this process that we're going through here today again. Have worked with the neighbors in trying to educate ourselves, all of us, and get input from the community about what's happening. Clearly, we have a drastic dichotomy in our need to grow the population of Minneapolis. On the one hand, we have a planning department hungry for development and thus pushing at all costs to create opportunities for density. On the other hand, we have communities wary of the process, wanting to preserve the character and human scale of their neighborhoods. The loss of these neighborhoods, which would actually have historic ramifications. These little C1 districts are precious. Linden Hills, once again, is at the forefront of what should be an ongoing citywide discussion. As Gene Johnson said, having active civic participation. The residents of Linden Hills, with the current appeal before zoning and planning, are trying to ask for open dialogue about a project that will forever change the surroundings of a very beautiful part of our city. Linden Hills, as you know, is situated only 2 blocks from 2 of our city lakes. City planning, I think, is considered an art, and I think retaining some of the beauty that we have in an area like Linden Hills is critical for the future of Minneapolis. We look at all these building heights and pictures of the buildings, but I just wonder how many of you have been to that corner and really felt what this means for the human scale and the existing character. The developer, in asking for this CUP is really only going to gain 2 units above the 18 that he was approved for. This 4-story, in addition to the requested variances, are certainly injurious to properties that abut the development, but also create points of contention that will come up again and again in our C1 districts.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, next. We have about 5 minutes left in the time that we've allotted.
I can only take 2. Madam Chair and members of the City Council Committee on Zoning and Planning, excuse me. My name is Jeff Magnuson. I live at 3010 West 43rd Street. I've lived in Linden Hills for about 24 years. On March 1st, 2012, the City Council's Committee on Zoning and Planning issued findings of fact regarding the Linden Corner project. That was the 5-story, 59-foot-high proposal. Today, we are discussing a 56-foot-high building, which is only 3 feet shorter than the previous proposal. And I would argue that the 56-foot-high building is essentially the same height and would have essentially the same effect on the neighborhood. I'm going to briefly read from the findings of fact from that earlier project. The proposed height and massing of the development is inconsistent with the scale and character of the surrounding area, which consists of a small-scale commercial district to the south and east and single-family homes to the west. The Linden Hills neighborhood commercial node, also referred to as downtown Linden Hills, in which the development site is located, consists primarily of traditional commercial storefront buildings that are narrow, from 30 to 40 feet wide, and 2 to 3 stories in height. The C1 zoning district that predominates in the development site is the only commercial zoning district in the zoning code that does not allow a maximum height of 56 feet as of right. The applicant's request for a maximum height of 59, and that was that proposal, I would amend that to 56, for a mixed-use building might arguably be consistent with a more intensive commercial zoning district. However, it would be unprecedented in the C1 zoning district, and I'm just reading from that finding of fact. Approval of the proposed project might also encourage similar out-of-scale development and impede development compatible with the character of the area and the purpose of the city's height regulations, primarily with regard to the C1 zoning district. I argue that the conclusions reached in 2012 are essentially valid today. I urge you to deny the CUP for height, and I also urge you to deny the side yard variances on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Would anyone else like to speak on this project, either for or against, or neutrally? Anyone else like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and see if my colleagues have any motion or discussion. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to deny the appeal and adopt staff's finding of facts on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, I will just add, I've seen this project twice now on the Planning Commission and here. I frequently visit this node. I think it's a beautiful place of our city. I bike down with my two little girls to go to the many very family-friendly shops there, and I agree with what people have said. It's a really beautiful part of the city, and I really appreciate everyone taking their time to come and to express your, love and for your community. I think that here we've heard some things about this project, just to kind of underscore why I'm voting the way I will on this. We are seeing a different project than came before this committee in the past when I wasn't on the council. From what I can tell, this is very consistent with the small area plan. And I think that there was a bit of disconnect there with what I know a lot of people spent time expressing and what was finally adopted. But what we have to look at is the zoning code and guided by the small area plan. And so this project is stepping back not only 10 feet, but much more in many places. The smallest setback is 12 feet on the 4th floor. And to me, that seems very consistent with the vision that was expressed in the plan and consistent with our zoning code. Again, this is a conditional use permit. So that's what I had to say. Councilmember Panesano, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm up here today not as part of this committee. I'm your council member, and I'm also your neighbor. I've lived in Linden Hills for 15 years. I see so many folks here today that I recognize and I know, and I appreciate your deep commitment to our community. But I just wanted to kind of reflect a few of the things that I think are the important points to weigh here, and I'll keep this really brief. The majority of the concern, over 99% of the input that we've received, though not all of it, is about height. And as you heard in the dialogue, this is actually about the findings of fact. This isn't about economic consideration. I know people have asked this developer a lot about his financing, and he has shared some of that information. Something is not and cannot be precedent setting or precedential if it's different. And this is a different project than what a lot of people have communicated to our offices in relating to projects. 2/5 of the properties in the original proposal, a different orientation of the building, roughly half the size. The scroll of paper that we saw during this public hearing, the numerous emails, we have to go back to the fact that this is a different proposal. One way this developer is looking to accommodate the small area plan is that instead of asking for a full 4 floors, that 4th floor is fully stepped back or more. This was a topic that was brought up during the small area plan discussions. I don't know if he got it from there or from his architecture firm, but I do agree that C1 in this area should exist. I know that the small area plan agrees with that, and I think it does here. This isn't a variance, and that is fundamentally different to the question of this committee. So I also just wanted to state that the 3-story floor plan that was approved during Councilmember Hodges' moratorium was not appealed. So this footprint is substantially the same. The only need to bring back these variances in this appeal is because of this partial 4th story setback from the approved 3 stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. Would anyone else like to comment? Any further discussion? Before I call the roll, I just wanted to note that I think there are a few policy issues that this conversation has raised, and I want to thank people for your time in raising these. I think one issue is the small area plan process and how we can better manage that, and especially communicating about the final conversation through the adoption process. And I've been talking with our staff in long-range planning about that issue, particularly as we gear up for our comprehensive plan update. The second is how we deal with setbacks for yards. We use a formula that's 5 feet plus 2 times the height of the building, and we use the highest point of the building. We don't acknowledge any stepping back from the property line, and I've asked staff to look into how often we see variances from that, what the variances are based upon, so we can have better information as we make those decisions. And then, I think we're hearing a tension between the desire for shorter buildings, for really nice building materials, and then the affordability of housing. And that's a policy question I think we need to continue to ask across the city. I don't I don't know. I don't consider $1 million condos necessarily middle class. I mean, I think that's a pretty high price point for our community. And so I think it's just another policy question we will all have to consider. So with that, Clerk, would you please call the roll on the motion from Councilmember Johnson?
Councilmember Goodman. Johnson. Andrew Johnson. Barbara Johnson. Kevin Reich. Abdi Warsame.
Aye.
Chair Lisa Bender. There are 6 ayes and no nays.
Chair Bender, may I make one friendly suggestion, just in light of all the new information presented, that there be an accompanying staff direction just to supplement the staff findings?
Sure. I'll move the motion to supplement the staff findings based on today's discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. That motion carries. So thank you. And thanks again for everyone to come today. We have 2 final items on our agenda. Both are discussion items. The first is regarding the Marcy Homes Master Plan and the Dinkytown Business District Plan. And I'll give people a moment to leave, but we do have still about an hour's worth of our business here. So please keep your voices down, please, as you're leaving so we can continue our committee's business. Could staff please come up and start getting ready for the presentation of item number 6 as folks leave? All right, thank you. Why don't we go ahead with the staff presentation as people are leaving?
Okay, thank you. Good morning. I am here to talk about the Marcy Homes Master Plan update, small area plan that's available now for your review and approval. Just for clarification, this includes also the Dinkytown Business Plan District document, which is being included as part of the overall master plan. While it had a separate process, they are of course covering overlapping jurisdictions, and we're seeing them as one unified plan framework. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the plan and then allow, of course, time for questions because, of course, as a small area plan, it has a pretty wide breadth of information. What you're looking at the overview is the sort of major goals in the Marcy Homes plan. The Marcy Homes neighborhood was the major entity to do this. They are fairly forward-thinking. Their original plan, which is currently on the books for the city, was adopted in 2003. This is an update to that plan that reflects the changes that have happened over the past decade, including new growth and development trends, new pressures on the neighborhood, and a desire for a refresh vision. It largely builds on what's in there already. It is not very different in terms of the overall direction, but it does provide some clarification and some additions. The goals up here listed are the major goals. I will not go through everyone in detail, but just to give you a sense of the feeling of the neighborhood and the feeling of the community in terms of what they want to see here. Being one neighborhood sounds like an obvious one, but Marcy Homes is a very distinctively diverse area. We are talking about the area stretching between East Hennepin, which is near downtown, has a very downtown feeling, historic low-density neighborhoods, riverfront development, historic mill areas, and going over to the University of Minnesota area, including Dinkytown, which is very university-focused. This is truly an area that encompasses a great deal of growth and change. You've probably seen their name many times in recent years for the many new development proposals that have come in and been approved in this area. They are embracing the riverfront, looking for connectivity to that, and really connecting with that. They want to make change contribute. Let me talk a little bit about what that means. This is an area that has accepted a lot of growth and development. I wanted to just highlight, even on today's agenda, the consent agenda included a new 6-story building in Marcy Homes neighborhood that was approved largely with support of the neighborhood. And that is not unusual, and that reflects a lot of what has happened in recent years. But it has been strongly their concern that the growth and development contribute to the neighborhood, be value added, and that there are supporting investments that strengthen the neighborhood as a result and support all the new people and business activity that are happening. Making the streets ours reflects this, saying we have through streets through here, we have aging infrastructure through here. Are we making the appropriate investments in the capital area and in public realm to support the growth that is being embraced by the neighborhood? And also just the fact that this is going to be a complicated area and will continue to be. I won't go into all the details of the plan, but just to highlight that the neighborhood has broken the area down into several character areas. Again, we're talking about everything from the northern end, which is industrial and actually near where the streetcar maintenance facility may be considered and will remain industrial. The yellow, which is the historic, indeed, a couple different designated historic districts, lower density housing area, guided for that to continue. The blue, which is the riverfront, including the Amiel Complex, East Hennepin Activity Center, the Riverfront Park, the steam plant, many other features going up to including all of those. The west side, which is lower density residential but more student oriented currently, and Dinkytown, which of course the commercial district right up against the university that has been the subject of much discussion as of late. There is guidance for each of those areas reflecting the unique character. Just to talk a little bit about Dinkytown, because that was pulled out as a separate process. It was decided to focus on that in detail and separate because the concerns of a business district are often very unique and different than the concerns of the neighborhood as a whole. We worked directly with the stakeholders in that area to address the concerns that were most important to them. They reflected the growth and change that has happened, the parking issues, which have become exacerbated by the redevelopment of some surface parking lots, and the sort of potential historic question. That is one that is currently pending right now and not fully resolved at this point. There is a designation study the HPC has authorized that is underway, but it takes a while to get done, and since it was just authorized a couple months ago, it will not be completed at this time. Just to say the plan has guidance that provides support for design review and for looking at how development happens in the historic district, whether or not a designation happens in that area. So it is supportive of some protections and guidance regardless. The plan can stand on its own. It does not need the designation study to be completed or for that to happen. But it leaves a space to say it can be responsive to that and consistent with that if that's developed. As you may well know, the designation would require adoption design guidelines. There's some advisory, not mandatory, but advisory guidelines included in the plan as a framework for that, so it's not starting from ground zero. In addition, there was a close look at each of the potentially historic properties, so that was considered as part of this larger planning process again. It is a complicated area, a lot going on. I can answer questions, but I just wanted to lay that out there so you knew that that was another part of the area. The other concerns around Dinkytown involved business vitality. We had a very close look at the market in that area and also looked at the market in other areas. The neighborhood has been very supportive of the idea of density leading to more commercial services and diversity of the business mix to provide a truly walkable urban area. And largely that has been happening. So we have limited tools sometimes in terms of helping business districts, but I can note that even during the planning process, they have applied for and have been awarded a Great Streets grant through the city to really sort of forward the momentum on that. Last slide. Again, I don't expect you to read all this, but it's the context of what we're talking about here today. Some major action steps. What is the major so what of this plan at this point? One is expanding the Dinkytown Activity Center. The Activity Center designation, as you know, is in the comprehensive plan and guides for high-density mixed-use activity, day to night, and so forth. Mutual agreement of both planning processes was to expand the commercial footprint of Dinkytown, actually including the area that was mentioned in the Riverton project approved earlier in the agenda. This reflects a need to accommodate the growing demand for commercial services in this area, the tightening of the market, and the need to say, do we have options for not just the big chains who can afford the high rents, but also the smaller scale local stuff? This was a joint agreement and reflects, I think, one of the first times we've had a neighborhood step forward and say we want to actually expand one of these commercial areas. So it is definitely a positive sign and supported across the board. Working with MnDOT and with others to improve 4th and University. 4th and University are two of the main streets through Marcy Homes. They are also, as everyone knows, major throughways for commuting traffic and so forth. They go right up to 35W. And if you've been there at rush hour, you know they back up. There's a delicate balance between managing those heavy traffic flows and making these more pedestrian friendly. There are a lot of bikes and peds in this area, one of the highest bike ped areas in the entire city. Just to note, 15th, one of the streets in this area, has more bikes on it on a daily basis than the Midtown Greenway. So it's definitely a place where managing a multiple level of modes is really important. This plan has a lot of specific recommendations, including how to handle that, acknowledging that we're going to continue to see a lot of all sorts of different types of traffic. Developing guidelines for construction and renovation. There are a lot of standards in here in terms of design to make development friendly and compatible with the neighborhood. I should mention, just in light of the conversation we've just had, there are not specific height limitations. This was not a desire of the neighborhood to get into the details of that because, frankly, they thought low, medium, high is good guidance. They can talk, and as I've noted, they've been accepting of a number of fairly larger buildings, including some cases where they're asking for more height to ensure a higher construction quality. That has been actually a discussion in some parts of this neighborhood and other nearby neighborhoods. There has been a lot of again, discussion around Dinkytown in terms of what that means. How do we preserve the historic character? Do we just reflect the character, or do we preserve the actual buildings? Again, some of those are still pending. But the intent, especially in the Dinkytown area, is to focus on the pedestrian experience so that the pedestrian scale is not overwhelming, it does not loom. It really does feel like an approachable commercial district and a walkable area. Again, that's reflected in the plan. And then, again, as mentioned in terms of parallel processes, the Central Riverfront Master Plan, which is the Park Board's document, is still underway. That's being drafted now and will not be completed probably before, last time I heard, October. So again, pending. They are not, of course, doing a new Riverfront Master Plan. They've had Central Riverfront for ages, but this is an opportunity for them to sort of refresh that and say what parts of the Central Riverfront are dated, need to be refreshed, what parts might need to be expanded, and so forth. That's not just Marcy Homes, that's both sides of the river, entire downtown CBD area too. So it's a larger area, but it does overlap here. But it reflects the fact that they're committed to working with the park board on that. As such, the plan itself really basically just says this is the regional park area. It's green, because green means park in the long term, and that's pretty much the level of detail. But as far as the programming and details of the park, it's deferring to that larger process that really drills into those details. So that is where we are now with this. I'll just put this up here as the final graphic. This is the master plan that shows the neighborhood, again, showing from the west to the east, bookended by large commercial areas and activity centers, low-density core, support in the orange for a lot of infill, higher density, medium to high density mixed use, and residential where appropriate, and of course acknowledging the riverfront and the uses there as well. I'll pause and ask if there's questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? I'll note also we were joined by Councilmember Jacob Fry from the 3rd Ward. Thanks for coming. Okay, great. So at this point, I think we'll move adoption of the small area plan. So, and Councilmember Fry, did you want to speak? Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't take up too much of your time, but I will say that this small area plan, probably certainly more than any other small area plan I have experience with, took quite a bit of effort over quite a long period of time from quite a large number of people. I do want to thank Hyla for all of her work. I mean, she was getting hit from every single side. Almost nobody was giving her credit for the work that she was doing. Mostly she just got insults, but I want to say you did an extraordinary job, and we really appreciate all of your help. I mean, this neighborhood is really a melting pot of every single different type of zone, every different type of neighborhood development you can possibly imagine, from Dinkytown, which is obviously a commercial node and is the hub for the university, over to East Hennepin, where I saw the very tail end of the Linden Hills discussion, and they were looking at, I think it was a 4 or 5 story building. Add a 0 to that, and that's what we're looking at over on Central Avenue there. So it's, and then you've also got the dynamic which plays out along the riverfront, and there are many different interests involved, and it's always a very difficult, delicate balance. Because you have to consider every single one of them. And I do believe, Chair Bender, that is there a slight amendment, or has that already been made to the underlying proposal that we discussed earlier?
Ms. Mays, could you address that? So I think Councilmember Fry's question is regarding the issue of the parkland in the area that's designated for future parkland but is privately owned. Is that, so there had been some discussion of language regarding that. Is that now in the plan, or do we need to move that amendment?
You would need to move an amendment. So what the plan before you right now is what was approved through the Planning Commission, which did not change any of the language as of the draft you have.
You want to give me 45 seconds and I'll be right back?
Sure. Ms. Mays, do you have the language that you had drafted for us?
Somewhere. Is it? Okay.
So I'll just take this time to comment about this. So I think as the staff presentation had mentioned, there's an area of this district that is aspirationally designated as future parkland. And there's been some question about that because of the private ownership of that land. And we don't have a parkland zoning classification. Is that right, Ms. Mays?
That is correct. There is no designation that's specifically for parkland. Parks are allowed in all zoning districts.
Okay. So what this plan would be doing is saying that there's a community desire for expansion of the parkland, but we are not even able to create a new zoning classification, or I guess we could legislatively create a new zoning classification, but there's no intention here to rezone this property into park.
Yes, I can offer a little more clarification. I just put up a map here. The area in question, not sure if you can see. Well, it's not coming up, but anyway, the central riverfront, yes. And zoom in. I don't know. This is close enough. The area shown as green on the future land use map is in the regional park boundary that is established through the Regional Parks Policy Plan by the Met Council in consultation with the city and the park board. That boundary is set there to sort of determine where the park can be developed and built upon. It does not necessarily mean the park board owns all the land in that area, and indeed they don't. The area I've circled includes a private landowner. It also includes the Xcel Energy plant. It includes the U of M steam power plant. If you look farther west, not in the study area, a good chunk of Nicollet Island. Effectively, they're in holdings. Properties are not owned by the park board that are in the regional park boundary. We do not have a zoning district for parks. There's good reasons for that, which we don't have to go into today. But effectively, the parks are allowed in all zoning districts, but there's no zoning district that only lets you do parks. As such, the properties in this area, though they're guided for park, it doesn't mean that we can force people to have them as park, because that would be a taking. We would need to acquire the property to make it part of the regional park, or we being the royal we, the park board would need to. This is just a clarification that we were talking about earlier, is just saying, let's make that very clear in the language to say, yes, it is guided for park long-term. Yes, that's the full intent. And yes, that means that if the park board wanted to purchase land in that area, they could use Met Council regional funds, which is, again, the guidance in the regional park policy plan. But it does not mean that automatically nothing there can happen but parks. That's just been conveyed, I think, pretty clearly through the process and backed up. I don't know if Eric wants to say anything in addition to that, but that's just it is. And so the language, and I do have it in front of me now, just clarifies that to say that we know that's the case. And this has also come up for those of you who are involved in the Above the Falls planning process, same conversation, because similar situation. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nielsen, did you have anything to add to that?
I don't, Madam Chair. Hyla stated it very well, very accurately.
Okay, perfect. Councilmember Frye.
Thank you, Chair Bender. I'd just like to add two pieces. First, during my previous comment, I failed to thank perhaps the group that was most incessantly involved, which was the neighborhood. They did a whole lot of work on this plan and balancing different interests, as I said previously. And I think it'll ultimately it's a plan that will further not just the interest of the neighborhood and the different dynamics that you have there, but I think it'll really facilitate growth with preservation in our city as a whole. And then with respect to the amendment and the riverfront there, I want to point out the reason for it. So we want to state this very clearly, we do have the long-term goal of facilitating park and specifically green space along the river, both long and short term. I mean, that is a clear goal. That is, as many people have said, as my aide said, a sacred ground. It's where the city began, and it's where the city, in my mind, should continue to thrive and sort of rally around. And in that, I think in many senses does necessitate a park space. That being said, we also have to consider ownership interests in the area, and I think the amendment reflects those interests while also accounting for longer-term goals. And if Councilmember Bender, did that require any further clarification? And can you read my chicken scratch that's on there?
No, I'm fine. Thank you, and apologize for that procedural hiccup. So I will move, just to clarify my motion, I will move to adoption and approval of the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Master Plan and Dinkytown Business District Plan, amendment of the policy guidance for the area into the city's comprehensive plan, subject to final review and approval by the Metropolitan Council. And I have a detailed text amendment to the open space portion of the plan, which appears around page 26, to add the text that reads, "The area within the regional park boundary contains several inholdings owned by private entities. While it is anticipated that these may remain as non-park uses for the time being, the current regional parks policy plan guides them for park or park supportive development over the long term." So on that motion, is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? That motion carried. And thanks for everyone's work on this, especially Ms. Mays, balancing all of the competing interests. Thank you. All right, so then item number 7 is the Mississippi River Corridor Critical Area Draft Rules, and this is a process managed by DNR. So staff is here to update us about this process, and I believe we'll be responding, and that's, again, Ms. Mays. Thank you.
Also me. Thank you. Switching gears, the critical area rulemaking process is indeed a process headed by the Department of Natural Resources. I state that up front because it's a little unusual when we're talking about reviewing regulations that we're not reviewing our own regulations, but these are ones established at the state level. This is already something that's in our zoning code. If you have reviewed projects at the riverfront area, you know we have a critical area overlay. This is a direct descendant of the guidance that was developed in the mid-1970s through the state to protect and guide the riverfront, including its cultural, economic, historical, and natural assets is the language, roughly speaking, in terms of the corridor in the Twin Cities. This involves not just Minneapolis, but I think 29 other jurisdictions, cities and counties, and 72 miles. It's a big area. The rules we have in place now are based on the 1970s guidance. This has not been updated since then, though it is now in the process. If you think about that area, it is pretty hard to develop rules that apply to that wide a range of jurisdictions. The guidance was pretty basic and I think established one height limit. Starting in 2010 and then discontinued in 2011 and started again in 2013, the DNR has been directed by the legislature to revisit those rules and regulations to provide more clarity and really update them. A lot has changed. The original rules, when they were adopted, included a lot of jurisdictions that didn't even have zoning or comp plans. Of course, not Minneapolis. We did, but a lot of areas didn't. So sometimes this was the only guidance. It is a very different policy framework now, and we like to emphasize that in responding to DNR, that we do have a lot of rules and regulations and protections in place already. So what is the substance of what the changes are? This really has moved from a very generalized concept of what is the guidance for this area in terms of the categories and so forth, to a more refined subcategory classification. Again, 70 miles, hard to get down to the details. And one of our messages to them has been, we need to make sure there's flexibility built in so that rural Anoka County and downtown Minneapolis aren't lumped in the same part and parcel. This is a map that is you will have received this in the information that shows the districts that have been designated in the city. The most intense districts are, of course, the downtown one, which is in our downtown and also downtown St. Paul. We have really, in the comment process, which has been extending since last year into this year, emphasized that we need to have the flexibility to really support an urban, dynamic, mixed-use, high-density downtown and inner core district. This really needs, of course, to be balanced with the environmental concerns in the area, and we certainly do that. But the format we have been giving in terms of the comments has been saying we need clarification in terms of how they apply in a city like Minneapolis. The request for council action you have now has a lot of technical details and comments that are specific. Much of the commentary that we're providing back to them is making sure that the language is as clear as possible so that we really understand how it applies. There are certainly some concerns we have about the language. For instance, that bluffs are not that well defined and may include people-made features, which can be problematic. The fact that guidance for view sheds is based on a plan to document that doesn't yet exist, and some other things that create ambiguity and create, frankly, difficulty in enforcement and interpretation. So we and many others are submitting comments to sort of ask for clarifications on that. And again, to reflect that there's a lot of differences along the corridor. We need the flexibility to make sure that our rules and regulations match. I do say ours because we have an obligation after the rules are done to revisit this. This has not gone through all different hoops in the city because it isn't our regulations, but this will have implications for our zoning code, our policy framework, and maybe some other documents as well that will need additional staff work once this is completed to update them. Our rules right now are based on the 70s guidance. The new and improved guidance will certainly change things to a degree. I should mention that the rules process, which again has been going since 2013 in this current iteration, has been very responsive to city concerns, has incorporated a lot of our informal staff comments to date already. We've appreciated the DNR as a partner and really committed to work with them as a partner. We've also been coordinating closely with others in the area, namely the Park Board, which is submitting its own comments, the University of Minnesota, which has, of course, a big chunk of real estate along the river, and the City of St. Paul, which, of course, is a very different riverfront downtown, but shares a lot of our similar concerns. So we've made an effort to sort of reinforce some common themes when possible between the various jurisdictions. The time frame has been coming together in a way that's it's not always possible to address everyone's on every page, but I think we have a lot of the common concerns we're trying to address. The time frame, just briefly, before I stop for questions, is the comment period is currently underway. It is almost up. This is the DNR's way of soliciting public comment, and it involved contacting, I believe, every single property owner in the entire critical area, which is thousands and thousands of people. They have all had the opportunity to comment. There were public meetings held in July that were open to them, and they are receiving comments, I'm sure, from all sides in terms of the perspectives. They are giving themselves some time after this comment period to process those, and then late this year, starting November, they're starting their formal approval process, which involves a number of steps that haven't been determined in terms of exact dates, but we'll have a final public comment period and public hearing process, very similar to our adoption process, but with probably some extra steps thrown in. This is in front of you now as sort of an informational item that we can certainly discuss, add, subtract. I think everyone on council should have been getting some updates about this on the way since it's been ongoing, and this is a fairly complex issue. I'll pause and see if there's questions or thoughts.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have two questions, or I'm actually looking for a response to two items that were brought forward by Friends of the Mississippi River. They looked at our draft comments and they had two concerns, and so I'm just looking for a response from staff. The first concern was extending the urban core district along the riverfront in North Minneapolis reduces protection for North Minneapolis riverfront land, which would be in contrast to the protections in Northeast Minneapolis and the Mississippi Gorge riverfront land, which is in my ward. So I guess, how about that question first?
The urban core district, what they're referring to, again, I wish they'd picked two colors that are a little more contrasting, but the pink is in the downtown area. This pink extends up on the west bank of the Mississippi. That area, if you can't picture, is sort of the North Washington's Jobs Park area, and then extending up into the industrial area on that side. I think there's a number of heavier industrial users along there. The guidance to putting this district is not something that the city specifically requested. It was developed by the DNR. I think they reflected that they knew there was an intensification. The guidance for that area shows a fairly intense redevelopment scenario, and it was supportive of that. We have not made a comment to not have that, but again, it was something that was in there already in terms of creating flexibility. The distinction between that and the red district is the pink district does revert to underlying zoning in terms of some of the categorizations in terms of setbacks and heights. As a city, it's hard to have a real problem with that because we do like to have some local control over the process. But again, it could be a comment that it be something less dense. In terms of, on the other end, the pink, again, that most intense district is shown for the east bank of the University of Minnesota campus, because again, that is a fairly intense area. I believe the U of M is completely supportive of that and actually would like a portion of the West Bank campus to be that classification as well. Again, the distinction between the two, the red district is a top height of around 5 stories, has a setback of about 50 feet from bluff line, while the purple says revert to support local guidance. So does that answer your question?
It does, and we might have another staff comment on that.
And yes, specifically to the comment about extending north, that comment about extending north was specifically to be able to include the Upper Harbor Terminal within the Urban Core District guidance. Primarily, actually, as we have gone through the technical work with our subconsultant on the Upper Harbor Terminal, we have come to at least one preferred alternative that looks at placing a building really within the park area, and that's the Park Board's preferred alternative, to kind of place maybe a destination restaurant along that river. If we're even going to begin considering things like this happening, where we have a more intense, amenitized riverfront on the Upper Harbor, then we would have to be allowed to guide it that way through the regulations. So we would like to see that happen. That's our hope, but we understand that there may be some resistance to that.
And would there be any ability to get exceptions for those kind of uses that we want while also still trying to maintain as much of the natural protections as possible?
I think that the variance, there is the possibility for variance, but I'll let Hyla speak to that.
I can speak to that. There is already a variance process in place, and if you've received anything that exceeds the current critical area guidance, there's been some variance that's in the process. We say variance, it's their variance, not our variance, so it's a different, same word, different term, not different implications. It basically means notifying them and they sign off on it or do nothing, and it just happens anyway. There is flexibility built in, and that's something we did push very hard in the code to say that we do not want this to be a one-size-fits-all policy. There are going to be exceptions and things where we have a really fantastic project. We really want to make it happen, and we would like to be able to make the case that even if it doesn't meet the letter of the law, it's the spirit of the law, and we have alternative compliance and so forth. So there is language in there that's supportive of that. We would want to continue supporting language being like that.
Great. I really appreciate you just addressing that concern. Then there are other concern that I'd, just be interested in hearing your thoughts on is around the draft comments requesting that there be varying standards for bluff impact zones, slope preservation zones, shore impact zones, vegetative management, and scenic views throughout the corridor, and that the concern would be that that might lead to kind of weakened standards around ecological health of the river if there's varying.
Well, this is something we touch on for more details and what that actually, on the ones of how the rubber hits the road, the St. Paul comments really get into this. Anyone who can picture the downtown St. Paul riverfront knows that it is actually built into the bluff line. There are cases where maybe that could be appropriate. Certainly, I wouldn't say there's anything that staff would recommend that was meant to be hazardous or degrade the environment, but there are special considerations sometimes in the way cities have developed, and they can be addressed in a sustainable fashion. One note in our area that probably maybe not a good example, but it's an example of where we need to address these concerns. The West Bank campus, which is built right up the bluff line at the U of M, has issues there and should be allowed to continue to be there, but will need to be addressed. So,
great, thanks.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's unfortunate Councilmember Fry is not here. I don't have a dog in this fight anymore since I don't represent any of the areas along the riverfront. But I will say this. We do not want to be in a situation where the DNR is telling us how we can develop our city. And that is essentially what Friends of the Mississippi want. What they're saying is, we don't trust you guys to make a good decision, so we want this written into the DNR plan so that you have no choice. So I would say that we have every bit of level of responsibility and care for the shoreline and steep bluffs of the Mississippi River, but we also believe that development can and should be appropriate in areas around it. If these rules initially proposed were in effect, the Carlisle wouldn't have been able to be built, because it would have been within 100 feet of the river. So I think about it as it pertains to the Upper Harbor Terminal. I mean, that's going to be hard enough to develop as it is, and a compromise between the city and the park board in order to create a fabulous promenade and parkland in front of it only happens if you can build something there in order to fund the cleanup of the site, the potential development of a park without shafting the park board with the extra cost of having to pay for it. So, I mean, I understand where Friends of the Mississippi are coming from, and what they're saying is, city, you aren't going to be strict enough. We want the DNR to have another level of regulation over you. And I would urge us to make sure our comments allow for as much control by the local government authorities as we can get within this process, because essentially these comments are saying, we don't trust you.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I completely agree with Councilmember Goodman. I think it is really incumbent on us, and I think staff has been very forceful, in our comments up to this point, and I think we should continue that type of comment that it is, we have unique circumstances with a fully developed city, and we have opportunities. I remember I can't remember who I was talking to the other day, but I remember when we did our first Above the Falls master plan and having a celebration at the river on Boom Island, and Representative Phyllis Kahn said to me, this is an opportunity with this kind of development that we'll see above the falls to actually be able to buy a Coca-Cola on the Mississippi River. Part of the issue that we have in our community is that we don't have easy access to the river for the pleasant activities, restaurants, promenade, as Councilmember Goodman said, for our citizens. And we're looking for that kind of development in the Upper Harbor, and that so that the river becomes an amenity to our community. And I agree. I do not want us to be in the position of, looking at needing to revegetate and, recreate. And I mean, we will do what is necessary to keep the beauty of the river and as much natural as we can. But we have plenty of places in the city where we do have that natural beauty preserved, and we have to have some spaces that are available for development and for active recreation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion from the committee? Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two points. One, there's been some comments from Park and Rec representatives. Their process, they have not quite completed, or they're kind of wrapping up their comments. And so I've committed to them not any specific comments per our process, but to sit down with their staff and kind of come together as they had in the earlier stages of the process to see how much compatibility we can have between the two jurisdictions. Not to say that one dictates the other, but to just have that final conversation. And so Commissioner President Walensky is committed to dedicating some time to that and staff time as well. But I also, wearing my Mississippi watershed hat on, the science doesn't really support the bias, the agrarian natural bias in terms of health of the river. It's not supported by the science whatsoever. As a matter of fact, most river pollution comes from agrarian uses. It's actually best management practices of the built environment that create a cleaner river when it goes through the city than when it ends up and meets the Minnesota River. That's not something that always makes it into these conversations. And just wearing the watershed hat, which is backed by the people of science, they do not agree by that dichotomy whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, they encourage more best management practice built environment to engage with our natural watershed. So just wanted to make those two observations.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? You're looking for a motion from a staff direction?
Sure.
All right, I will move staff direction to complete and submit comments in response to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources requests for comments on the Mississippi River Corridor Critical Area Draft Rules. And I really appreciate the comments and of my colleagues, and definitely agree that I appreciate staff's comments that we do want to maintain our land use authority within the boundaries of our city. So thanks. With that, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion carries, and we are adjourned.